I pledge allegiance to the flag
to
of
the
the United
United
States
States
of
of America,
and to
and for
the
the
republic
republic
which stands
stands
one
one
nation,
nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
In Kiwanis mission statement, Kiwanis is
Kiwanis is a global
organization
organization
of
volunteers
dedicated to
improving the world
one
one
child
child
and
one
community
community at a
at a
time.
through service
Service to others.
Good, thank you. And our invocation today is going to be by Professor Jones. So, Stephen, go ahead.
Thank you, Gary. No professor, I don't teach any classes, but
Okay.
just so that we're clear. Good afternoon. Dear God, thank you for being you. If you opt to never answer another prayer, the fact is you have already done enough. As we gather together at this moment, we are encouraged about the future, yet mindful of our past and the trailblazers that sacrificed so much as they sought life, liberty, and justice for all Americans. We look to you for continued guidance, direction, mercy, wisdom, patience, love, and most of all, forgiveness when we fall short of your will. Let us leave here today living more humanely. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. Guests, I see Andrew Muffet, our Lieutenant Governor, is here. Hello, Andrew. We can't see you.
Hello, everyone. Sorry, camera's not on.
Well, we know you're there.
Thank you.
And thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's my pleasure.
Other announcements, again, COVID vaccine now open to 70 and over. How many have gotten the vaccine so far?
I have.
Good. 1, 2. I know there's been probably 4
signed up
that have gotten it, 4 or 5, so that's good.
Yeah, I've got an appointment.
Shoot. That's great. Volunteer opportunities. This week we loaded the or did backpacks. We did had 5 of us there and loaded or did almost 154 backpacks in less than an hour. So great job, everybody. We're setting records there. She asked us if we wanted to do 80 or 90 and said, how many you have? And she says 150 something. So, okay, we did it. So we got it all done. So that's great. Yeah. Who?
Lily.
Oh yeah. There was a young lady intern that they have there, Lily, who joined us and she helped us out quite a bit. We gave her all the heavy work. We told her, so, but it was very, very good. We've got another opportunity to unload the food truck at Nourish on February 12th coming up. So we need about 5 people for that. They attempted to use somebody else the last time. I told Kathy there was some kind of a motorcycle gang. It's a motorcycle club, but they said that they had this club going to do it, and it ended up they didn't show up. So we ended up doing it, or she did get somebody else to do it, but she really trusts us on being there. And she says every time you guys sign up for this, you show up. So that's good. February 16th, we're packing backpacks again for the Nourish program. We need 5 people for that. So if we have any more people that sign up for that, we do need it. You can do it on Portal Buzz or let me know. Carolyn, I already put you in.
Okay.
So that's good. Jerry needs speaker coordinators, right?
Still looking for April and July.
Okay.
So it's not that difficult. We've had this conversation before. Several of you have already helped, and that's appreciated. We may have to resort to draft. I don't know. But anyway, April and July are still available.
Okay. We also need invocators for at least the next 3 months. Where people, Terry Armstrong has been putting out emails to people, and nobody's signing up. So we need some invocators for at least the next 3 months. So if you can do it, let me know, or let Terry Armstrong know. He's managing it. So let us know so we can set this all up. Jerry, I think you've got next week, right?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. And so, yeah, let me know if you can do it, and I'll get it over to Terry, since he's making a list of it all. Scholarship forms all gone out to the schools. Make sure you, if you know of any seniors in high school, let them know that they can get these scholarships forms filled out and get them back to us. They're all available, and we can get these scholarships awarded again this year. Next Tuesday, January 26th, is the state of the city and county. It's at 7 p.m. and it's going to be on the radio this year because of the COVID thing. So it's on WCDQ 106.3 FM. So it's going to be state of the city and county at 7 p.m. So you can check that out. As we said before, Sharon has announced her retirement. So we're looking for a club treasurer. Anybody that's interested, please let me know. We do have some interest from a couple of people, but anybody else, we can talk about it. So please let me know. Meetings. Oh yeah, I've started a Crawfordsville Kiwanis YouTube channel. So we're on YouTube now. So we're putting all of our meetings are going to be on YouTube. So I will be sending that out to you with the link to that, and just keep it. It'll stay the same, but after we have the meetings, I get them downloaded, get it done right, and put together, and post it on YouTube. So it makes it a lot easier to see them, or any of your friends that can't be here. It's good to be able to find them. Any other announcements from anybody? I know Caleb can't be on here today. They are working their committee on the Pancake Day, so they're working on that. Member updates. I do have one from Dave Polly, and I think he's taken lessons from Shar. He sent me a text today, or an email today. He says, "I'm sorry to say that I will miss today's meeting with Dean Jones. I was looking forward to it, but I happened to fall on the ice Saturday morning. Broke 3 ribs and punctured a lung." He says he's out of the hospital now, but he doesn't have the stamina to sit in one place for any length of time to watch their meetings or get involved in the meetings. He says, "All things considered, I'm doing well. When I was taken to ICU after my chest tube was inserted, the nurse asked me what I wanted for dinner, and I said, well, if they have any spare ribs, I'd like them." So I don't think they gave him, but he needs your prayers and help and healing and getting back in service there. So any other updates, member updates from anybody? Okay. Community involvement meetings, as we said, not planning any in-person meetings until we know where we're going here with all of this stuff. So we'll still working on that. We talked about Pancake Week. Interestingly enough, I got an email from somebody at Southmont wanting to know what she's supposed to do as the faculty advisor for Key Club. And I had put out everything that wasn't going because I couldn't find anybody, and Now, all of a sudden, they've appointed a faculty advisor. So I do have a call into her. Her name is Catherine Yoakum. And I guess she's an English teacher and a softball coach maybe, or some kind of a coach out there too. So I'll be talking to her, and these are the things I think we're going to allow Karen back in to do these things. Right, Karen? Give you the opportunity. Yeah. So we'll work on that stuff. Happy Bucks. Who's happy? Q2 is Riley Hospital. So I'll throw 5 in for Riley. Who else?
I'll throw 5 into Raleigh also.
And you're throwing it in for Green Bay, I know.
2 more games, that's all I asked for.
I talked to my doctor the other day, and this is the surgeon that kind of saved me a couple of years ago, and he of course he's a Green Bay fan, and so I told him I'll even cheer for Green Bay since the Bears are out of it. So okay, who else?
Do you realize that this is Aaron Rodgers' first time playing an NFC championship game at Lambeau Field?
Oh, wow.
I read that.
Cool. Anybody else?
I'll put in 5 for Riley, and I have my appointment to get my COVID vaccine on February 12th, and was happy to see the inauguration ceremonies come off without any incidents or anything like that. Wish the new president, the new administration, all the best, and hope he can execute on trying to reunify the whole country.
Right. Yeah, I thought that thing went well yesterday. Anybody else?
Gary, I'll put in 20 as a thank you to all of the Kiwanis who have been serving the Nourish program and helping us feed those kids who are food insecure in Montgomery County.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, that's good. This day in history, January 14th.
21st.
Or January 21st. Yeah, I wrote, I know it's the 21st, but 1793, Louis the 14th or 16th of France is executed by the guillotine in Paris, following his conviction for high treason. 1830 in Portsmouth, Ohio. African Americans were forcibly deported. 80 African Americans, and what they said in the paper back then is all the colored people in Portsmouth were expelled from the city in 1830. Just horrible. 1954, USS Nautilus, the first nuclear-powered submarine launched on the Thames River in Connecticut. And 1968, anybody know what that one is on this day?
Well, no.
The Battle of Khe Sanh.
Oh.
I think one of the most publicized and controversial battles of the Vietnam War began at the Khe Sanh Air Base. In 1986, and where's Bud? I thought maybe he'd have been in this, but this was 100 people participated at Purdue University in the Nude Olympics. So I figured Bud was involved. National days. Okay, today's International Sweatpants Day, National Cheesy Socks Day, and National Hugging Day. I don't know how all 3 of those go together.
Did you say cheesy socks?
Cheesy Socks Day.
That sounds
Yeah.
disgusting.
So somebody, is that one of your kids, Karen?
No.
Okay. Birthdays, 1815, Horace Wells, the dentist who pioneered the use of medical anesthesia. Interesting. 1884 birthday, Roger Nash Baldwin, the founder of the American Civil Liberties Union. 1922, Telly Savalas. 1924, Benny Hill. 1933, William Wrigley Jr. And 1940, Jack Nicklaus, born in Columbus, Ohio. And Kiwanis birthdays this week. There's none from our club, but there is one Kiwanis birthday this week. Anybody know who? 1915, Kiwanis International.
Oh,
So 106 years old today. So happy birthday to Kiwanis International. And any other birthdays or announcements or anything? Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to mute everybody. And Stephen, you'll have to unmute yourself. Let me get this thing where I can mute all. And you'll have to unmute yourself, Stephen, when we get started here. So I'm going to introduce Stephen Jones. Dean Jones is responsible for the executive management of the professional development group for Wabash College. This includes career services, on-campus student employment, and a Center for Innovation, Business, and Entrepreneurship, along with the Malcolm X Institute for Black Studies. He's a 1987 graduate of Wabash and returns to Wabash after a 23-year career with IU Health, most recently serving as vice president of the Adult Academic Health Center, where he led human resource functions for 6,500 team members. Previously served IU Health as executive director of talent management, diversity, and HR leader, director of recruitment, staffing, and diversity, and director of diversity and inclusion. Stephen is a graduate of the Stanley K. Lacey Executive Leadership Program, the Indiana Healthcare Leadership Academy, and was named a Hoosier Fellow at the Randall Tobias Center for Leadership Excellence. Let's see. Okay, and he's the president of Financial Health Federal Credit Union Board of Directors and previously served as community through the Indiana Symphony Society, Circle City Classic, Super Bowl Host Committee, Center for Leadership Development, Indiana Black Expo, and the HR Association of Central Indiana, to name a few. So do you, Stephen, what else do you do in your spare time?
Oh, I just have fun.
Good. So it's yours, Stephen, and I've made you a co-host so you can do your slides and everything. Go ahead.
All right. Well, good afternoon, and thank you, Gary, for the wonderful introduction. I appreciate it. And let me just get my presentation up here. And so, as I said, thank you for the opportunity to present today. Met with Gary, seems like a couple of months ago now, and we talked about what may be helpful for the group as a brief discussion about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so happy to be with you today. I told him, I said, I haven't done one of these in a while. I think the last time I presented to a group here in Crawfordsville was the Leadership Academy as a part of their sort of program. And so happy to be with you today for a few moments and share my thoughts. So relative to a little bit more background about myself, and maybe that this will help kind of set the stage for what I'll talk about during the presentation. I am one of 6 siblings. I grew up in the inner city of Indianapolis. Spent a lot of time in the Baptist church growing up. Sundays were a long day. Then Wednesday night for prayer meeting, and Thursday night I had to attend choir rehearsal, even though I didn't sing in the choir, but there was always a sense of opportunity to be around the church. I was educated in public schools. I was a part of the busing order by Judge S.U. Dillon in 1973. So it went from my neighborhood school to Anna Pearl Hamilton on the east side of Indianapolis. First in my family to graduate. And one kind of unknown fact, I was a part of Key Club at Tech High School when I was a student there. So I do have at least a connection to the work that you do. So without any further ado, I'll jump right into the presentation and let's get started. So a change in thought. Let's kind of roll the clock back a little bit and look at some things that hopefully will set the stage for our discussion. Do you remember when counties in Indiana had no ethnic diversity? And if my memory is correct, it was not until 1984 that all 92 counties in the state of Indiana finally had at least one person of color. Do you remember the first day you overheard someone speaking a foreign language at a mall? So for those of you who have lived in Crawfordsville, you probably would have had to go to Lafayette or to Indianapolis to have this kind of encounter. But I think for those of us who recall what this was like, it was a little unsettling, but the world has changed. And so we have to think differently about how do we embrace people who are different. Do you remember when the primary diversity issues were gender and ethnicity? I still recall the Battle of the Sexes with Bobby Riggs and Billie Jean King. That was many, many years ago. But at that time, when we thought about diversity, it was only gender and ethnicity. But so much has changed in the world in which we live. I see that Coach Petty is on the call this afternoon. Do you remember IU having 2 ethnic minority basketball coaches in succession? After Bobby Knight, you had Coach Mike Davis, and then followed by Coach Kelvin Sampson. For IU and its rich basketball history, that was clearly a change in thought for the university. And then lastly, on this particular page, what was your reaction when you saw your grandchildren playing with a diverse group? Think about that one for a second. You know, kids just want to have fun. But in the era that we were raised, there wasn't a lot of mingling with children outside of your own family and those who lived directly in your neighborhood. And neighborhoods at that time were pretty homogeneous. But as you now think about, you know, families and where they live, the diversity and the desegregation of neighborhoods has allowed for more interaction. And so I just ask you to stop and think about what was your reaction when you saw your grandchildren playing with a diverse group for the first time? So for those of us who are on the call today, when we think about diversity in America, in the 1970s, we spent a lot of time talking about the melting pot. And the melting pot obviously had its pluses, but there were also some minuses associated with it. Today, we more want to think about sort of the salad bowl approach or the toss salad as we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion. With the melting pot, we have more enforced assimilation, and the individual identity of the person is lost. While with the salad bowl or the toss salad approach, it's more of a blended coming together of all of the ingredients, and then you have the option to add a very distinct flavor with salad dressing. And so let's talk about this one for a little bit more. So go back to the melting pot. I'm not a big cook, but work with me on this example. So let's take, as an example, creating a pot of stew. So we take our chuck roast, we take our potatoes, we take the carrots, we take the corn, we take green beans, and we mix it all into the pot. We add a little bit of heat to that, and then we begin to stir. And so what happens when we begin to stir it and the heat is applied to the pot? The pieces become fragmented, they lose their identity. Although it's a great taste when it's all done, when you take a spoon and scoop some out, you can't necessarily tell that the potato is a potato or that the carrot is a carrot. it has lost some of its figure, and it's probably lost some of its color as well. Now, let's switch to the tossed salad approach. You have your lettuce, you have your carrots, you have your cucumbers, you have sunflower seeds, you have all the things that make a tossed salad what you want it to be. And regardless of how much you toss it, you can toss it for 2 hours. When it's all said and done, lettuce is still going to look like lettuce. Sunflower seeds are still going to look like sunflower seeds. The carrots are going to look like carrots. And so those individual ingredients haven't lost their identity. And so I distinctly remember when I was interviewing for jobs, when I was getting ready to graduate from Wabash College. You know, I did well with the first interview on campus, at least I thought, but I wasn't really getting a lot of second and third interviews. And so one of our alums came to me and said, when I asked, I said, what do you think I need to do? He said, one, you need to get you a darker blue suit. You need to get you a yellow tie. And you need to get a pair of wingtip shoes. I'm like, wingtip shoes? Those are what my father wear. But wingtip shoes, the darker blue suit, the yellow tie made all the difference in the world. And so in the melting pot approach, I had to assimilate and be more of what corporate America expected me to be. Was that right? Was it wrong? I'm not here to make that judgment, but I'm just letting you know that until I made some changes to the way that I presented myself, I didn't get those second and third interviews. And so when you think about where we are today and the influx of different nationalities, the world has really, really changed. And so the melting pot versus the salad bowl or tossed salad approach is kind of background for the next slide that we'll talk about. So by a nod of heads, for those that I can see, how many of you would agree that our world has changed? Just yes or no? Some yeses? All right. So how does that then impact you as an individual? So you asked good questions, so let me give you some answers. We interact daily with people who are not like us. People expect to be respected. Communication barriers are more likely. Not everybody has English as their first language. As you're working with coworkers or with individuals as volunteers, they bring different perspectives. Their culture is different. Their religion is different. There may be sexual orientation issues, educational differences, physical ability. The status quo is gone. Every day there's potentially something new to address. When you go to Kroger, you potentially encounter people who are not necessarily like you. If you go to Lafayette, if you go to Indianapolis, you're going to run into some things that may make you question, you know, what is it about them that I need to get to know more about? Or do I want to get to know anything more about those individuals that are different from myself? And let me just tell you this, there is no quick fix for diversity. It is, it's a personal, lifelong learning, and you're always, in many respects, going to have to adapt to some change. So how do you adapt to change? So in my background, we always talked about the customer. And for our discussion right now, the customer is that person that you don't know. The person that you don't know that you end up working with on a volunteer committee. And so the goal would be focus on the customer and serve them well. As you're having that interaction with the individual that you don't know, try to get to know them, get to know something about their background. And I think you'll always find that you share more in common than what you share as differences. But you have to be open to having that conversation. And so if you're open to having that conversation and willing to focus on them, that's a great goal to start with. Secondly, I would ask that you respect each other and value the differences that you encounter. If we were all the same, this would be a pretty boring place. And so that sense of difference that we bring to the table, it does help to make things a little bit better. And so how do you adapt to change? Here's what I would encourage you to do. In the next 2 weeks, I challenge yourself to learn something new about someone you don't know currently. And I know with COVID, that's pretty difficult to do. But you know, having a Zoom call with someone that you encountered when you were volunteering at some place, or someone that has moved to Crawfordsville that you really don't know, maybe having a phone call with them, or meeting at Starbucks, being physically distant, but still being able to hold a conversation. I would challenge you to do that as you think about becoming more of an advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion. You're part of a large community. Crawfordsville, even though it's not, Lafayette or Indianapolis, it is still a large community. And there are opportunities for us to work together and eliminate some of the unnecessary stress when we're trying to pull together projects and provide services for those people who need it most, even in the Crawfordsville community. So how do you become a better person relative to being an advocate for diversity and inclusion? First of all, you can look at those you work with, those that you volunteer with. What are their backgrounds? What are their experiences? What are their tendencies? Learn about their culture, their experiences, and the experiences of different people. You can also go to the library, attend cultural festivals, talk with experienced travelers, teachers, and students. Try to imagine what it would be like to be that person who is different from you. Think about someone who moves here and is a minority, and they move to Crawfordsville. Can you imagine how they might feel the first couple of months that they're here? So treat those individuals as though he or she were you. Be upfront and discuss your confusion with people who are different from you. If we don't have candid conversations, we'll never get beyond where we are. And I know that those conversations are sometimes tough. I'll never forget when I was a student here at Wabash my freshman year, students would ask me things like, how do you get your hair like that? How's it so curly? They would ask, do you like watermelon? They would ask, do you mind bringing me back some barbecue? So it's all of those things that are somewhat awkward. And if we don't get comfortable with having some of those awkward conversations with people that are at least the expert to some degree because of their background and their culture, we'll never make the improvements that we need to make moving forward. And so continue to be open and help remove the confusion. And so as you're working with people, and you're volunteering, ask if they're, following what, the plan is for the day. Ask them if you're explaining things in a way that they understand, because individuals, as an example, who have English as a second language, they may be well-intended, may become your best volunteer, but if they're confused, they're not going to reach their full capacity. And I share that because of having worked in healthcare for so many years, we would often see families, Hispanic families, leave Riley Hospital after having their checkout procedure with the social worker. And the social worker would ask questions, do you have your medication? And the response is yes, yes, yes. Just a lot of head shaking. Do you have plans to go to the pharmacy? Do you have transportation to get to your follow-up, doctor's visit? And it's always yes, 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 yes. And in reality, they weren't understanding what was being asked of them. And so we went through a period of time where we had a lot of patients, a lot of children who were rushed back to Riley in a condition that really didn't have to exist. And it was based upon the fact that their parents didn't understand what was being asked of them when they were being discharged from the hospital. What are other ways that you can become better? If someone you know uses an inappropriate name for you or others, speak up. We have to become more of an advocate for justice in the world in which we live. Tell the person how those names make you feel and list acceptable alternatives without criticizing harshly or blaming. If you've called someone an inappropriate name, focus on apologizing instead of defending yourself. And sometimes that's hard to do. We recognize that we've done something, but then we want to justify why we did what we did. Don't assume you know what others want to be called. Ask what names people prefer. You know, this goes back to that whole era where, you know, men would often refer to women as sweetie, hey baby. They have a name and you're more likely to be better off calling them by their name. Don't tell cultural or ethnic jokes. They're degrading. They always come back to bite you at some point or another. I used to tell our employees all the time, don't say anything in the workplace that you would not want to be seen or heard on the evening news. And if you typically follow, you know, that as a guideline, you're typically okay. When faced with a language barrier, take the time to learn key phrases in the other language. So the example I normally share with this one is, think about your children and your grandchildren. You love them, and when they learn to talk, it may have taken extra effort, but you figured out how to communicate with them. And for many who don't have English as a first language, that's some of what we have to do. You have to take the time to get to know kind of the phrases and help them appreciate what it is that you're trying to explain. And so I know that it's sometimes time consuming, but if we're going to become better people, if we're going to become more humane, if we're going to make Crawfordsville and Montgomery County a more welcoming place, then these are some of the things that we have to do to become better. Let me leave you with this thought, and then I'll take questions. Diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance once you arrive. Equity ensures you have the resources for the dress or the tux to attend the event. So I would hope today that you'll leave valuing diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that's the formal presentation, and now we can open it up for questions.
Stephen, I really appreciate that. I look at what you've talked about here, and hopefully I find myself open to others. My biggest problem is the language barriers, whether it be Hispanic. I grew up in the city of Chicago where, the people in my neighborhood, you had Polish, Lithuanian, all speaking different languages. And, when those kids came to school, they were all speaking English. They understood other languages, but when you went to their houses, mom and dad and grandma and grandpa were there, all spoke their native language. Mm-hmm. And it was very, very difficult. And I think trying to, it's a great tip about trying to learn parts of their language so that you can at least have some communication with them.
Yeah. And we still see that within school systems. I sit on a couple of school boards in Indianapolis, and that interaction with the families is typically directed, unfortunately, to the student who's attending the school. The parents are still probably 5 to 6 years behind where their son or daughter might be with learning the English language.
Right.
Other questions or thoughts? This is the first time I've ever done one of these via Zoom. It really hurts the interaction as you're going through the slides, so I apologize.
I think it's a fantastic presentation, especially, going through what we went through yesterday and seeing the comments and everything about trying to get back to a realistic, idealistic world where we're not fighting with everybody all the time. And these are the things we need to do. So very, very timely for us.
Yeah. Well, let me throw another factoid out, and maybe this will generate some discussion and how you think about it. So in 1980, if you had to guess, what was the white population in the United States? 1980, what was the white population? Anybody?
No idea.
As a percentage. Chuck
Probably
is saying something. He's muted.
75.
75%. Anybody else want to take a shot at it?
It was more like 90%.
And 90%. So in 1980, the white population in the US was 83.1%. As of January 2020, that had dropped to 59.7%. And so all of this discussion about the new majority, it is becoming real. In many states across the US, the new majority is already there. If we come a little bit closer to Crawfordsville, in Indiana, in 1980, anybody want to guess what the white population was? 1980 for the state of Indiana.
Probably close to 90.
91.2%. Today, that population is down to 83.3%. So even Indiana in the Midwest is beginning to see the change that many states have seen for the last 15 years. And so that's really what I would argue to you is the reason that we need to be more open. We need to be more honest with ourselves about how do we feel about these changes, and take the time to get to know people who are different from yourself. Even as a college, we now appreciate the fact that while we still recruit a number of students from Indiana, if we're going to be successful, we've got to open up our recruitment to more than just Indiana, Illinois, and Kentucky. So we now have a recruiter who's based in Texas. We have a recruiter who's based in Illinois. And it's those types of things that we had to do to remain competitive and hopefully lead the charge in ensuring that men still have an opportunity to have an all-male education. And so it's incumbent upon all of us to think differently about how we approach things. Clearly, working in corporate America, where there were, a number of women in high-profile healthcare positions, for a lot of men, that was very different. When you went to the C-suite, 15, 20 years ago, all you saw were men, except for a few of the nurses who were the chief nursing officer. But now you've got CEOs in an abundance running healthcare systems across America. So it's a very different, environment. But when you look at the difference in just the demographics related to population, I think you will begin to see that we're on a different path. And yesterday's inauguration, I think, spoke to that in a lot of different ways.
This is Morris Mills. How do you deal with the issue of diversity and still have a focus for society?
And a focus for what?
For society in general. Society in general can't be spread out over everywhere. It's got to have a focus.
Yeah. And so I think even within, that sense of having diversity, but then also appreciating that even two white men who are 60 years in age, they're not completely the same. If I were to ask two of you who are 60 years old or above, and you happen to be white, what were you doing last night at 7 o'clock? I'm going to get two very different answers, at least I hope. If you answer the same to that question, I would then ask, did you go to church or attend some kind of religious service on Sunday? If I got the same answer there, I may ask you, do you prefer foreign or domestic relative to the vehicle that you drive or that you would purchase? But as you get to know people and you ask questions, even though they're two white males, more than likely you're going to find some things that make them very different. And what tends to happen on the opposite side, particularly for people of color, is that you'll look at me and say, maybe Coach Morgan, who's a little bit younger than me, but you'll think that we're both the same, and we're not. And so that's how you still embrace diversity, even in a small, environment.
I looked at this, Stephen, as a start of us trying to include others in our organization. Going back, it was 1987 before Kiwanis even allowed women into the club. And so it's been not that long ago. And, how in the world we need to become more diverse. We need to become as diverse as our community is. We're not there yet. We need to be able to open up to others to invite them and have them share in what we're doing with the children in the community, both in volunteering and helping us identify those people that need the help. And I think that's what I wanted to try to get to our membership, to talk about this whole thing with diversity and opening it up.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you've had some great individuals who just happen to be, African American. Andy and Jasmine Robinson, they were fixtures in the Crawfordsville community. Great people. I'll never forget running into Mrs. Robinson years after I graduated at the airport. That's when you could still go to different gates and you didn't have to get separated by concourse when you got there. And had a 30-minute conversation with her before she departed Indianapolis. And Andy was just phenomenal. And then to think about, individuals like, Coach Johnson, who remains a part of the Crawfordsville community. There's so much knowledge that he has, his background, time that he spent, I believe, out in Idaho or Wyoming, wherever it was, when you compare and contrast that experience with coming, or being from New Jersey, that just speaks to the wealth of knowledge and history that he has relative to issues of race in America. Being married to a white woman for as long as he was, that too obviously probably created some tough moments for him. And so it's just a matter of, how do you take advantage of the resources that are near you so that you can open up, your organization to being more inclusive. And it starts with, small steps, and you'll eventually get there. But you can't get frustrated in the process because it takes time. It's not like flipping a switch and everything happens and then you can all sing Kumbaya. It just doesn't happen that way. It takes time to build relationships.
Good. Anybody else? Any questions?
I have an experience I would like to relate. I spent almost 5 years in Mississippi in a manufacturing situation in the late 1960s and early 70s. And at that time, they were just beginning to integrate the schools in that community. And local white people were asking me questions about it. And I said, well, hey, these kids ought to go to school together. They're going to live in the same community together. They may as well get acquainted with each other while they're kids rather than waiting till they're adults. And I think it gave some of the local people something to think about.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, clearly, one of the best things that has ever happened in America, from my perspective, is athletics. I mean, when you think about AAU basketball, when you think about traveling baseball, traveling soccer, it has opened up so many opportunities for different families to get to know each other. You know, you have a common, desire. You want to get to the point where you're winning and your team, takes home the championship. And so you can put those differences aside. And as we have learned from each other, I think it has helped to make America a better place. So whether it's down in Mississippi, dealing with questions of how do we become better, or if it's in Crawfordsville, the basis of getting better is still the same. It's about building relationships and taking the time to have those conversations so that people begin to feel like they can put their guard down and really get to know individuals on another level. I've often said, obviously before COVID, asking someone to have a Coke or go get coffee and donuts, you can learn so much more about them in that environment. People are less defensive over food. So if you took them to dinner at St. Elmo's, you really have a good conversation. You probably get to learn a lot about them. So, but that's been what I've learned in my now 55 years of living, getting the opportunity to have conversations with people in an environment where there is not the sense of feeling threatened. You can have some good conversations and go a long way in building relationships.
Steven,
Go ahead, Mac.
an experience I had having coached for over 50 years. My first coaching job was in a community southwest of Knoxville, Tennessee. I went to the University of Tennessee and was a county high school, and had African-American players on the team. And my religious background, I don't know why, but because of it, going to church every Sunday and so on, I decided that I was going to take the basketball players to different churches, to their different churches.
Mm-hmm.
And so 1 or 2 Sundays out of a month or whatever, we would take off and we'd go to a church. And my black players were a little uncomfortable for sure, going to predominantly white churches. My point guard's dad was a minister. And so we took the team to their church. And my white players were extremely uncomfortable as well.
Mm-hmm.
But when we finished doing that, several of them came up, the white players said, "Coach, they pray just like we do."
Uh-huh.
I said, "Yeah, that's because we're not much different other than just our color." And I learned a great deal. That was probably one of my greatest learning experiences as a coach when I first got out of college.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I just wanted to share that idea.
No, you're absolutely right. The whole church experience, the differences with death and dying, it's a tough time for families, whether they're white or black. But in some African-American traditions, the funeral is not going to happen within 3 or 4 days. It may be a week. It may be a week and a half before Big Mama is put in the ground. And there are reasons why that happens, and I won't go through all of that, but death and dying is very different amongst individual, ethnic groups. And so we have to be sensitive to that, particularly when you're in a management role and not understanding, what some of those differences may, or how they may impact the employee's ability to be at work. The other thing, is the social economics of, diversity and inclusion. When many of us probably, get a bad tire, we think, well, let's just go ahead and replace all 4 tires so we don't have to keep coming back to the tire shop. Well, if you're making, $15, $16 an hour, you may not have the option of getting 4 new tires, but you will get that 1 tire plugged, you'll get it patched, and try to keep it going for a lot longer time frame. And then the next week, you've got another problem with another tire. And so it's just that continuous or vicious cycle. And so when they have problems getting to work, if you're not sensitive to the differences, and in some ways walk a mile in their moccasins, you may not be viewed as as a sensitive leader. So, but that's probably for another whole session. And maybe next time we can do this in person. I really do miss the interaction as I'm going through the slides.
Good. Anybody else? Okay. Well, I do appreciate you being here today, Stephen. It was fantastic. It's a great story. You talk about the assimilation and the melting pot. Chicago has always been known as the melting pot, because of all of the immigrants that we had in the city. And I know exactly what you're saying when you talk about assimilation, because you tried to get the others to live the way you did, rather than you understanding what their specific circumstances were, in trying to live a little bit the way they do when you're dealing with them and talking with them. And that's very, very understandable. I mean, we tried to get those people that spoke Polish or Lithuanian or whatever, tried to get them to speak English, or you get mad at them when you go into a store and they're speaking Spanish. And you try to get them to change, rather than you understand that it's a different world that they live.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's a very valid point. I'll share this last story and then I'll go. When Hurricane Katrina hit the New Orleans area, one of the biggest debates that I had with individuals in training sessions on diversity and inclusion would sort of go like this. They would question, why didn't the people of color just leave New Orleans? Why didn't they just get up and leave? Everybody had said that Katrina was coming. Why didn't they leave? And so I said to them, some of those individuals didn't have a credit card with a $10,000 availability on it. They didn't have reliable transportation. They were waiting for their next check to come. I said, so just because you would have not thought about having inadequate resources for those people to leave, there were a number of things that kept them in New Orleans, and they had to live through the hurricane. And so oftentimes we get so fixated on our own life, we don't think about what other people are going through. And so it's important to take a moment to step back and evaluate, what are the resources that are available to that group or to that individual, just like with the tires. If I can't buy 4 new tires and I'm patching and plugging my way through, I'm probably going to, miss some days of work, or at least be late before I get there. So there's a lot of opportunity to become better. And so hopefully you feel at least a little better prepared to embrace the diversity that you encounter, whether it's here in Crawfordsville or in a trip over to Lafayette or to Indianapolis.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great afternoon.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next meeting for everybody will be January 28th. And our speaker will be Dr. Kevin Mackey, who's an epidemiologist out of Chicago. And I've asked him to talk a little bit about some of the long-term effects of this COVID thing and where he thinks all this is going. So that'll be next week. Quote of the day: never look down on anybody unless you're helping them up. Jesse Jackson. So thank you all for being here today, and I appreciate it. And stay safe this week. And we will be, like I says, we'll be getting this put together and get it posted, and it'll be on YouTube. Thanks all. Take care.
So long, everyone.